And welcome to the Sunny 16 podcast for another week of film photography fun. We've got a great show in front of us today. Very excited to be doing this. I may have had too much sugar this evening, so brace yourselves, everybody. Everybody else in this call has already had to suffer it, so it's only fair that you listeners have to as well. Speaking of people who have been suffering my oversugared self this evening, we have with us the wonderful Clare Marie Bailey and John Whitmore. Whoop, whoop.
Woo! Hello, everybody.
Great to have you guys back. John, how are you? We haven't seen you for a few weeks.
I am much better. I won't say I'm 100%, but I am much better. Thank you very much. And looking forward to calming down a bit after that intro time before recording with you. Nice and relaxed now.
Nice and relaxed. Quiet time now. Quiet coyote time for me. And Claire, how are you?
I'm good too. Thank you, Graeme. Been enjoying the nice weather, as I'm sure everyone has.
Yes.
Getting a bit of shooting. Yeah.
And looking very glamorous tonight, which I feel is important to mention because you've made a special effort. And you always look glamorous. This is important to say. Claire always looks glamorous, even when she's come fresh from whatever nightmare work she's had. But we are putting this show out this week on video because we've got quite a lot of visual content to share. So this is going to be up on YouTube as well. So John has his banana. That's the seal of quality. So if you want to go and watch along on YouTube, then do check that out because, okay, we've got quite a lot of visual stuff to share, partly because of our guest this evening. We've got a lovely guest, somebody who we have known for, I would say far too long at this point. And it's a delight to finally get him on the show and talk about his new film that he's got out. Welcome to the Sunny 16 podcast, Toby Van De Velde. Toby.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for having me.
It's a delight to have you. Toby, I was led to believe that you lived on a boat. Turns out you actually live in a cyanotype, so that's very exciting.
Yes, just need to work out how to make red cyanotypes.
That's very true. So before we get on to your film, Toby, let's get a quick background of what you do and who you are. So because you're a pro shooter, so tell us a bit about you.
Well, I went straight into being a lab technician after college in 1991. Did that for 11 years. I've had a hand in most photographic processes over the years. I've done C41, black and white, E6. I even worked for the only lab in the UK that did Scala back in the late 1990s. As the digital photography revolution slowly killed off the lab work, I knew that if I wanted to stay in photography, I'd have to retrain as a Photoshop technician, which didn't appeal, or become an actual photographer. So I managed to get a job working for a newspaper in 2001. And I did that for 13 years whilst freelancing on the side. In 2014, I went freelance full time and just been a photographer for my whole life, really. Film and digital. The antidote to having to produce well-lit, well-composed and sharp images for my clients has always been to muck about with things like 1920s cameras, pinholes, cyanotypes, old processes. The images that look like they were taken 100 years ago are what I do to counteract the pressure of having to produce perfect images from my D810.
I mean, whenever I think of your stuff, I do always think of the creative stuff that you're doing in terms of exploring old techniques and trying new things with them. So I remember when we met up at the photography show 3 years ago, I think it was, you gave myself and Rachel and I these lovely coasters that you had printed cyanotypes on onto tiles, really lovely tiles. So experimenting with cyanotypes, you've done a lot of different experimenting with cyanotype and using that technique, even down to trying to, with some degree of success, making in-camera cyanotypes. This is the thing you've tried as well, isn't it?
Yes, using my Hasselblad at 2.8. It was a few years ago now. A very nice August day at 2.8. I was able to make an image appear after 8 hours exposing. on in
Mhm.
bulb mode. I then
Yeah.
promptly washed it and lost
Yeah.
60% of the image.
I mean, I think 60% is pretty good going. It's a technique that I have messed around with a little bit myself, because I'm stubborn and because you want to try things despite people going, you really can't do it. And I think
That
after
makes you
my
want to do it all the
experimentation,
more, doesn't it?
yeah, and then you kind of realize they're probably right. You probably, not in any practical way, do
No, I
this.
think the secret to the cyanotype paper negatives in camera is not washing them.
Mm,
Put them in
yeah,
an old plastic bag from a box of film and
yeah.
keep them in the dark forever and never
Yeah.
look at them.
That's perfect. It's great. I can't believe that solution hasn't been presented before, because that is the ultimate way forward.
Well, I suppose it's a bit like solography, isn't it? Sam Cornwall's solar cans. You get the
Mm,
image out of the can, you scan it once, and then you squirrel it away in the
That's
dark
it.
and look at it very short periods of time. I think that's the same with making cyanotype negatives in camera.
yeah,
Once you finish
yeah,
exposure, scan it or take a photograph of it and then put it away in the dark and just enjoy it sparingly and
yeah.
just use the digital image.
Enjoy it sparingly. I just love the idea. A cold winter's evening, you and the family huddled around your fire going, should we treat us? It's like Charlie Bucket and that one piece of chocolate. Like, shall we have a little bit? Let's look at the cyanotype. Okay, but only for a couple of minutes, and it has to go back in its bag.
Yeah, well, that's what it used to be like back in Victorian times. Before
No situation
before
was ever like that.
before fix was invented, people could make images. Usually, there were photograms using leaves and feathers, but they couldn't fix them, so they had to do
Mm,
exactly that: put them in a light type box, and after dark, pull the curtains, and have fleeting glimpses of them using candles. Otherwise, they just fog and go black. So that sort of thing is as old as photography, predates
that's true.
fixative.
So there you go, Toby, as old as photography. Um, So I suppose we should move on, Tobe, to the exciting new thing that you've got going on, which is this film that you have brought to market. It's been what, a couple of weeks since you
Yeah,
launched it?
2 weeks. It's Monday. No, it's Tuesday. 2 weeks and a day. 15 days since I went live. I've had a very good response. Had quite a nice amount of sales all around the
Hmm.
world. I've sent film to America, United Kingdom, Singapore, Malaysia, Canada. So I've had a good global reach with the film,
Yeah.
and yeah, the film has started to be developed now. I'm getting my first images from users in America and in the United Kingdom. Stig of the Dump.
I'm familiar.
He developed a role a couple of days ago at home, and he's starting to post his images.
We should
Very
probably,
nice.
before you go too much further, actually say what this film is.
Yes,
Because
of course. An introduction would be in
I can
order.
tell that the sales part of this is new to you, the promotion and marketing thing. So your
It
film,
is. My film
it,
is a Red Eye Redscale. I'm respooling film to make a bespoke boutique film, 35mm film, to make Redscale film. Yes, I've got a big cartel shop where you go to buy it, and I've got a presence on Instagram, Twitter, and Flickr. Just search Red Eye Redscale, and you'll find me on those 3 platforms plus the big cartel shop.
very good. See,
Um,
that's much better. You're getting it now. You're getting it now. So, Redscale, let's talk about your film. Why should people be interested in it? I mean, there's probably a lot of people who have maybe heard of Redscale film, maybe never shot it before. What's cool about Redscale?
the experiment, I think, really, that's why I first started shooting Redscale, because it's an experiment. I enjoy the aspect of respooling it as well. That was one of the main attractions when I first started doing it. It's just mucking about with film in the dark. Um, you, although you have an idea what you're aiming towards, you don't always necessarily know what you're going to get until you get the results. Yes, so you can see the pictures scrolling by there.
Yeah, there's a really good. So yes, on the video, for those who are watching on YouTube, well, for those who are watching on YouTube, you can see what's going on. For those who are listening, are you on the what page are you on the website?
The Flickr page.
No, this is my Flickr
The Flickr
gallery.
page. Okay, well, we'll put links to all this in for people who can't see. There's a beautiful selection of really varied images shot on this Redscale film. And I think what it does instantly when you look at these is it makes you realize that red scale film, there's some special effects films, and I would put red scale in with that. I think there's some special effects film which can be quite narrow in what their uses can work for. You'll go and go, oh, it's fun for this, but not for that. Some of the color shift films, some of the, things like some of the Yodica films, some of the double films, like they'll work spectacularly well for certain situations, but not brilliantly for everything. I think Red Scale is probably one of the most universally applicable films. It can add something to anything if you want that look. And you've got a selection of portraits, landscapes, urban landscapes, all sorts of different stuff going on, street photography, and it all looks pretty cool on there. Are these mostly pictures? I've seen actually seen some pictures of Clare on there, so I'm guessing these are not all pictures you've taken, Toby.
No, this is as good a point as any of the conversation to say thank you to my beta testers. I sent some rolls out. Clare was one of them. H. Clark was another. Tina Rowe.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine called Emma from an organisation known as the Artcasts. I approached people whose work I admired and asked if they'd beta test for me.
Do you get a call, John? I didn't get a call. I didn't.
No.
Did you? No. Weird. Okay, carry
is
on.
this where we kick Toby out of the conversation? Yeah.
Yep. Where's that banana?
I did ask more than 4 people to beta test for me, and not all of my beta testers have come through with the results yet. Although I'm still hopeful some of them will, especially once they hear and see this podcast. But the thing about Red Scale is the technique is to shoot through the back of a roll of C41 film, and you have to overexpose to get through the base to get an image. If you shoot at box speed, you tend to get a very muddy and underexposed image. When C41 film is made, the color dyes are laid down on the base, so that first red is put down, then green, and then blue. So traditionally, when you're shooting C41 film normally, the red dye is the last to be exposed. So when you reverse C41 and make red scale, the red dye is exposed first. And when you overexpose by, say, 2 or 3 stops, the red becomes the dominant image. If John's scrolling through Flickr, if you find some of the pictures that are very, very dark red and black, very contrasty, that's the sort of thing you get on a 2 or 3 stop overexposure. And as you go through to as many as 8 or 9 or 10 stops overexposed, you burn the reds and the blacks out completely, and you end up with very muted yellows and greens that give you a very vintage sort of 60s early color photography sort of feel. And that's one of the attractions for me of shooting red scale is, although you never know exactly when you get, there's such a wide variety of results you can achieve. It's not just one thing over and over again. You can overexpose at 2 stops, you can overexpose at 10 stops, and the same subject matter between 2 stops and 10 stops, you'll get such a variety of results. So it's just, that's the appeal, really. It's got such a wide.
I enjoyed being a beta tester, and thank you for asking me and sending me some film. And for listeners, if I would encourage them to get online and get some of the film, because isn't that beautiful? Because
that's a Welsh pony.
It's nicely packaged, but I loved your instructions that came with it.
Oh, good.
I thought it was really helpful. So you got these instructions which sort of said about, if you, just what you've said really, if you overexpose it, you can try this, and if you slightly underexpose. So I found those really helpful, and I decided I would try and shoot it, different kind of settings. And for me, I was trying to get really, really deep reds. That's what I was trying to go. So I'll have to get some more film because I want to get even more reds. But I thought it's a lovely film, and one of my favourites is this one that I shot, which is Newborough Forest, and I call this picture
the horses. or the
No,
no,
not the
no, the
floral.
burning
Horses. I
forest.
like the horses, but yeah, it's like sort of the flame trees of Tika in Newbury
Yeah,
Forest.
that's a very
Yeah,
classic red scale look. The
yeah,
deep
yeah,
blacks and reds and the
yeah.
contrast.
But
As you
I've been
said,
looking. You can get. I think once if you play with it, and then again, isn't it? It's thinking about possibly shooting it out of context as well. But I really like it. I'm definitely going to get some more film. But yeah, for listeners, the instructions I thought were really helpful, Toby.
Well,
They were
thank
really
you,
nice.
Claire. The when I was coming up with the concept of launching Redeye as a
Mm,
brand, I thought that one of the things I wanted to do was make sure people understood
mm,
what they were going to do with it, especially with the range available. And I just wrote some blurb. It's just an A4 sheet of paper,
mm,
and it just really gives a quick, in a nutshell, explanation of how Redeye works, and then just notes on exposing and overexposing and what you can expect to get.
mm,
and just
as
really helpful.
Yeah, as in because that is one of the things that I think is fairly unique about Redscale is the fact that there is because of, and it's really interesting to hear you explain why that is. The fact that if you overexpose by a little, you're going to get these very dark reds, but if you overexpose by quite a lot, it starts to look almost more like cross-process slide film because the other
Yeah,
colors start coming in, but all shifted, and that is also a very cool look. So it
Mm,
gives you a good range of options that you can all get on the one film while shooting it.
that's if you don't mind me putting in the picture that is on screen at the moment, the office block with the brick wall at the bottom of it. That's
yeah.
a good example of how a couple of steps overexposed would get you the reds, which is the brickwork down the bottom, and that was quite a dark area. And then the office block was a very much more brightly lit area. So that's like two different steps of overexposure in one image.
Mm,
The brickwork being 2 or 3 stops over, and the
mm,
office block being five, oh no, 5
yeah,
or 6, 7 stops over. So
yeah.
that's an example of how you can get both the reds and the muted greens and yellows in one image with the right lighting situation.
Yeah.
So you've got your film developed and you come to digitize it, how do you tell your scanner how to interpret these images? Like, does it try and compensate for this color shift?
I've got to confess, I don't own a scanner, and I've never done my own C41 processing. So up until as of this week, I've been sending all my Redeye to Silverpan,
Mhm.
and Duncan and the team have
Mm,
been doing a sterling job at providing me with the images. Pretty much, as you see on my social media presence, that's how they've come back
Okay.
from Silverpan.
mm,
That's going to change next week. I respooled some Redeye out of the 35mm cassette into 127 format backing paper, and I shot
Ooh.
that in one roll. I shot in my Kodak vest pocket autographic, and the other in my Benchini Comet. Um, the lab Silverpan could scan those images, but
mm,
not with the sprocket holes. And one of the reasons I respool 35mm film into packing paper, 127 and 120 format as well, is I want the sprocket holes. So I've got those particular films dev only, and
mm,
I'm going to have a go at doing my own digitization. I don't have a scanner. What I do is I use this is a Nikon 7700. It shoots raw images,
yeah.
and the macro lens, literally you can focus an inch away, so you can really fill the frame with a 35mm frame.
Mhm.
That's how I do all my black and white digitization, using that camera and a light box and
Right.
290 degrees of black cardboard to mask off the area.
Mm,
So that is an experiment coming up in the next week. My own red eye digitization. It'll be interesting to see how my technique will compare to what I'm getting back from Silverpan.
mm,
It's one of the I mean, normally with ordinary color film or color slide film, color negative film, you have a baseline that you're trying to work towards because you have an idea of people's skin tone, something like so you're trying to balance to that. Because I think, I mean, whether you're doing this digitally or whether you were doing it using darkroom techniques with the printer. I mean, you've done color prints in the past, John, where you're trying to use the filters to get the color balance right. It's
mm,
always about judgment. And with any alt process or alt film type like Redscale or Lomography Purple, then it really just becomes about artistic choice. I think you go, okay, what do I like it looking like, and whatever you like it looking like is what's right, because there isn't, I don't think with those kind of films that there is a an absolute answer. Oh yes, this is what the negative should look like, because it's just not how color negatives work, is it? I think it's a good film because of the range of exposure latitude. It's quite a good film for using it in more basic cameras where you perhaps don't have control over either the shutter or the aperture, or maybe both, but you could still load it up, take it out on a bright day, and the fact that you might have slightly different lighting conditions just means you're going to get slightly different effects from that.
I suppose an automatic camera, you'd need to consider your ISO, because if you didn't have shutter and aperture, you'd have to overexpose just purely with the ISO. So
I was
I don't
thinking of
know.
more basic point and shoot stuff like the Vivitar
Mew.
wide and slim. The Mew is not. How dare you? How dare you? But stuff like the Mew, not the Mew. God, now you've got me doing it, Toby.
The wide and slim. Wide and slim.
But yeah, wide and slim, a Holger, stuff like that.
You'll have to consider what the default, because there's no DX code on Redeye cassettes. So if you put it into a camera looking for a DX code and it doesn't find one, you'd have to consider what the default ISO setting would be.
Yeah.
Redeye's box speed is 200.
Can you put, like with DX coding, can you put stickers on to a canister to fool the camera?
I don't doubt you could, yeah.
Yeah, you can. If you go on the internet, you can find places you can print them off, and it's.
That's
I'm led to believe it. Yeah, and also it means you could print the DX code off wherever what you want it to be. So if you know, okay, I know I really like this. So when you said it's rated at 200, is that okay? It's rated at 200, but you want to shoot it 2 stops over, or are you saying no? If you shoot this at 200, you'll get this very dark red look.
I think if you shot at 200 with no other compensation to the exposure, you shot it at box speed and metered to what the camera at 200 ISO was saying, I think you'd risk getting very muddy underexposed pictures.
Right, so 200 ISO is the
difficulty penetrating the base layer of the film.
Right, so 200 ISO is the original.
That's right.
Okay, so people would probably be looking at more like 50 ISO down from there.
If you rate your camera's ISO to 50, you'll be getting 2 stops overexposure straight away.
I think I did mine at 50.
Yeah. So if you didn't do anything else to your exposure, but you shot Redeye at 50, you'd get 2 stops overexposure, and that would be the deep contrasty reds and blacks.
Did you try many different color films for this?
I did experiment with a few, yes.
Yeah.
Not acres of difference between them all, to be honest.
Yeah. Because it's worth
the color change is so wide and varied. It doesn't really matter what the original stock looked like when it was shot and processed normally.
Yeah. It's obviously a lot of people listen to this are keen photographers, and it's obviously worth noting the obvious that this is a technique that you could try at home if you want to, and I've done this in the past some years ago. If you want to get a roll of color film and get an off there, and you can respool it yourself, but it's a bit of a faff. You need a dart bag. It's totally doable. This is just an easy solution if you just want to go, I want to buy a roll of film, I want to get going, and
it is very
not have
easy
to deal with the faff.
I started my Redscale journey doing it, as you say. I got an old empty canister. I got a new roll of C41 film. I taped the 2 ends together, and then I didn't have a dart bag or a dart room. I put the films inside a hoodie like this. That made my dart bag, and I put that under my duvet, and I drew the curtains and switched the lights off, and that's how I did my original Redeye respooling when I first started getting into the technique.
Can I just clarify that you're not still doing this, Toby? Because I'm not sure that's a sales.
One of the great benefits of leaving the boat and coming to live in a house is that I actually have an actual dark room now.
Very nice, very nice. And were you saying, Toby,
all my respooling is done by hand in a dark room in safe light-tight conditions?
I'm very pleased to hear that. And are you saying that it's not just available in 35mm? I know you said you've been rescaling to 127. Is this a thing that you're going to be making available on other formats, or will it only be 35mm?
I have had requests for 120 Redeye already.
Mm-hmm.
That is something I'd like to get into. It's just a
Mm.
question of finding the stock, finding a source to do it with.
Would that work the same way? Does 120 film have an anti-halation layer in the same way that 35mm does? Or would you look to do it the sprockets route and have it tape through? It seems like it'd be a tricky thing. I think
I'm not sure I could do actual 127 film very easily. That would mean cutting down. You have to worry about the numbers on the backing paper. But if you were using 120 film and cutting that down, the numbers wouldn't line up in the same way that they would with a 127 backing paper and a 127 camera.
But regardless, you're going to have to take the film off the paper and
Turn
respool
it
it
over.
facing the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as I
Yeah,
said,
I have done it for my own personal benefit. Certainly,
and
it's
are the
doable.
effects the same as on 35mm?
Yeah, they are.
Cool. That's
Yeah.
because that's one of those things because nobody makes 120 red scale film because it's probably a pain in the neck. I'm guessing that's why. So,
That's why people have been asking me if I'm going to do it. I think.
Yeah.
I would imagine that one of the problems with doing it in 120 is that there's no cheap 120 color film.
This is a major obstacle to Redeye going into medium format. Yes, although I did have somebody contact me on Instagram asking me if they supplied me with a load of 127 paper and spools, would I rescale 35mm into them for them? Which is one of the reasons why I did the 127 shoots a couple of weeks ago with my my vest pocket and my Benchini.
Yeah.
So
I just finished shooting and developing a roll, and I say finished. This film has been in my camera for, I think, probably 4 years. It was some of my, and it's kind of classic Graeme in that the film I was using was my vintage HP5, which is 35mm, and the camera that I was shooting it in was an Ensign Ranger, which is a 6x9 camera, I think, roll film camera. And like I said, it'd been in there for 4 years, and yeah, that was probably not the smartest thing to do, but I got some pictures of it. But then, like you, Toby, I had the same problem of I came to digitize it and I couldn't. My scanner doesn't get the sprockets on there, and this film was super springy and super curly and super foggy and all the other great things that go with this film, especially once it's been
that's
in
why
there
we
for,
do it.
yeah, that's why we do it. But yeah, it's good fun. Yeah, doing stuff like that is a good time, and it's nice to be able to. I think the idea of having a 135 film on 120 I think has a lot of potential. I think the only thing from my own personal experience with having just finished with this Ensign Ranger is that you almost need to sell it with some kind of little cellophane mask to say, make sure when you're looking through your viewfinder you're thinking that your frame lines are here.
The middle third. I've actually,
Yeah.
in my non-Redeye account, my Toby V photo account, just recently I've just shot some 35mm Kentmere 400 in my Voigtlander Besser, which is 6x9. And I did find the same as you. Some of the pictures, there's a big blank bit of film with a bit about that big, which is where I've got somebody's head, and everything else below the head is missing because it's the bottom of the film. So yeah, you have to be careful when you're framing 35mm in a medium format camera.
Yeah. But still, it's really cool. I think this is really cool, and I think everyone. I said we'll put the link to your Flickr page for the group in the show notes because that is the best advertisement for this thing that you could possibly get. You go and look at the pictures on there, and if that doesn't inspire you to get out, and it's been a long time since I shot a roll of red scale. But the thing about red scale, as with so many of these films, of these effect films, is that it can bring a new look to a tired scene. You could walk around somewhere that you've seen and photographed a million times, and when you're shooting with a different kind of film like that, you're going to get a very
Breathe
different
new
look.
life into your creativity.
Yeah. You were saying, Claire, that it's something you want to return to again. Do you have ideas in your head of what you'd like to do with it now you know how it's going to behave?
I feel like I haven't shot it enough, if you know what I mean. So obviously I don't have the experience and the knowledge that Toby does, but I definitely want to get some more and try and get like red images. Yeah.
What about you,
Yep.
John? This kind of thing your appeal to you at all?
Excuse me.
That veiled no.
I don't really experiment with kind of what do they call it, like different sorts of films like that have like special effects films and stuff. It's
John,
not-
having a
it's not
black
really-
and white dark room, do you find you just tend to shoot black and white film almost exclusively?
Pretty much. Like I do occasionally shoot color, but it's always portrait, or like I very occasionally shoot slide film, just because I like it that as
You
an
cross-process?
object. Yeah. I'll cross process stuff. That doesn't bother me. But like this, like I don't know, like the Lomo, what is it? Metropolis was the latest one they brought out. Things like that don't. I don't know. I always say like, because I try to have a full analog workflow, and I don't do a lot of color printing. It doesn't appeal to me because I always think, well, if I'm going to shoot color and I want to do something like this to it, I would do it digitally. Whereas I think if I did more color printing, I would be very much drawn to these sort of films because you're then getting a very specific style, like visually. But it's because I don't do much color printing, it doesn't. I'm not drawn to it.
I wonder what darkroom printing as red scale negative would look like.
What,
If you get a
using it as
similar
black and
effect.
white?
Be intriguing.
Well, grayscale. I also wondered, I make paper negatives in my pinhole cameras. I've also wondered, would you be able to red scale color paper?
Nah. Because it doesn't have the anti-elation layer.
No, it
this is
wouldn't
going to end up like your Cyanotype adventures, Toby. Unfortunately, that's the thing. Unfortunately, like when you're going through, because and that's the thing, that is kind of the magic of red scale, is that you've got this layer there. You know, and you're just using film literally the opposite to the way that it works, and you get this incredible effect. I mean, I've made prints from color negatives before now onto black and white, and that's perfectly
I've done it.
doable, and that can work well.
I've
And I would
developed
imagine,
color negative film in black and white chemicals as well.
oh yeah, that's all good. It gets a certain look. And but I think if you try to do a black and white print of a red scale picture, you'd probably just get a fairly you get a black and white print. Yeah. Exactly.
Without that much detail.
Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying, John, about the fact that because you're doing that full workflow, you want to use the films because the idea of using a film that you can't take all the way through the process. That certainly, like that Ilford HP5 that's, I don't know, 30, 40 years old, of which I've got quite a lot of it left. It's making me think about how I use that now, because realistically, I know from having tried more than once to print from that's not happening, because it's got a fairly hefty amount of base fog and then low contrast pictures on top of that. You can get stuff from it from scanning it, and I can get, I'm going to put air quotes around this, worthwhile images from it from scanning it, but not from printing it. So,
it's a look though, isn't it? It's like if you're doing it intentionally and you know that's the final result you want, then I think that's a different approach. But for better or worse, I've always gone down there try and get a kind of a perfect source image on the negative and then manipulate afterwards. So maybe it would be a good thing to do, is actually just think, right, well, actually I'm baking this look in from the start into the negative, and then everything that comes afterwards is determined from that. I do wonder if you were to do like an RA4 print of a standard color film, but with the red filter all the way up, how that would compare to red scale, because I don't think it would look the same at all. Because
I think it just like there was a red filter on it.
Yeah, whereas
as opposed to the way that the light burns through the base layer before it hits the color dyes when you're shooting red scale.
Yeah, because there's a different look to this, isn't it? Like the ratios between the different colors is completely different to just putting a red filter on.
Yeah,
it's not the same
definitely.
Yeah, it's a very cool thing. Well, congratulations, Toby, on bringing it to market. You know, it's
Thank you.
An adventure.
It's been nearly a year I've been working, actually proactively working towards it with the internet presence, and it's been a couple of years since the idea was first germinated. in a discussion with Melanie, my wife, about just getting a side hustle going, really.
Yeah.
And it's been a good and enjoyable adventure
Mm.
That's
getting
the
to where
most
I am
important
today.
thing.
Yes.
Has to be worthwhile. So let's just say again, where should people go to buy this stuff? That's an important thing to get out there.
If you go to Twitter or Instagram and search for Red Eye Redscale, both of those accounts in my profile have a link to the Big
Mm.
Cartel shop where
Mm.
you can go and buy.
Good plan. Have you developed your roll of film from the Benchini Comet yet?
Well, the Red Eye,
Yeah.
they're both with silver pan at the moment.
Oh, it's I have to say, because these cameras nobody ever, the word Benchini does not come up in conversation ever. And it's been actually years since I've used mine, but I've got a couple because obviously one, I'm not going to have one. That would be stupid. I've got a couple of Benchini corals. There's two cameras. There's
Is
the
that the
corals.
medium format?
Yeah, that's the sensible one,
Mhm.
the bigger one you can get filming. Although bizarrely, it's not 6x6, it's half frame. So it's not 6x4.5, it is half frame
6 by
medium
3.
format. Yeah, of course. Of
Brilliant.
course it is.
Where can I buy one?
They're great, but I last time I put a roll of film through it, and this is how long ago it was that I was putting a roll of Neopan 100 to it and not thinking twice about it because that was before we even knew Neopan was going to go away. And the camera, for anybody who's never come across one of these Benchini cameras, they're basically like I think they're aluminium, aren't they? They feel like aluminium,
Yeah.
something like it.
Like a feather.
They're like an aluminium Holger, I think is the best way of describing them. Like an
Oh,
aluminium
they
Holger.
sound nice.
Not too
And the,
far down my Instagram account, there is a picture of my Benchini Comet.
yeah.
Oh no,
which is
it's
the
the
less
most
good one.
recently pictured picture. If yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
Oh, this
Top
one,
left
this
there.
one here.
Yeah, that's the Benchini
Oh,
Comet and
okay.
the vest pocket. There.
But what amazed me with this roll, and I took that
Yeah,
out and
nice.
shot it. It was a bright sunny day, and that lens, like I developed it. Holy moly, this is actually, when you get it right, so sharp, but you do have that kind of Holger vignetting out at the end.
Mm.
I took I wanted to try and make it 6x6 to make the most of this, because you could get a 6x6 one, but I haven't got one. So I took the mask out from the inside of my eye and screwed the mask. Turns out that was also holding the lens barrel on to the front. The lens barrel kind of fell off. So at that point, I thought, well, I really do want to try this without so I've just sellotaped the lens back onto the camera. So the lens is currently held in place on that camera by, electrical tape. Yeah. So that's good. But yeah, they're worth keeping an eye out for. There's quite a lot of these Benchinis, both the Comets and the Corals out there. I think the Coral S, I think, is the one that is 6x6. But if you want something that's like a Holger that isn't a Holger, but will give you kind of similar shooting experience, you can focus it. It has like a focusing thing on the front. Sometimes the bit falls off, but you can just put it back on again.
The Comet has the same.
Yeah, they're great. The only problem that I found with the two that I bought, and I'd be interested to hear whether you had the same problem, is, and this harkens back to a conversation that I had with Vlad and Mark about the problems with Russian cameras. The grease that was used in the focusing ring is clearly some
Solid.
sort of, yeah, and it gives it like they were absolutely fixed, rigid, but get some solvent in there and that sorts out.
I have been doing lighter fuel.
Yeah,
it's a short-term fix, but it doesn't last. It goes very stiff again. I think it was M from Emulsive. He said you can pop the camera into an oven for 5 minutes.
Wow.
That heats the grease up.
Yeah, I've heard that advice before. Now that's bad. I found if you just get it in there enough and just move it, and eventually you can just kind of wash it all out. That's what I did with mine. Just and also one of them just fell off, so that made it real easy to clean. Anyway, the Benchini Coral, check it out. Cheap on eBay now, I promise, and it's a great alternative to a Holger if you want that kind of thing. If you want to be cooler than the Holger kids. So let's give one more shout out to where people can go to find out about Red Eye Redscale film. And of course, see your work as well. So give us both Instagram and Twitter handles for you.
If you go to Instagram and Twitter and search Red Eye Redscale, that's where you'll see the Red Eye work. I also have a Flickr gallery as Red Eye Redscale as well, and all those sites will give you a link to go to the Big Cartel shop where you can buy Red Eye Redscale film. And my personal account is Toby V Photo, also on Twitter, Instagram, and Flickr as well.
And
A
the
great
dog.
place to go.
Let's warm
And
up.
And Mr. Planks. Don't forget, go to
Mr. Planks.
Instagram and search hashtag Mr. Planks.
Thanks.
I
First
cannot
name,
vouch for this.
first name too short.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, it's rude.
I
That's
am-
rude.
I
Whippets are
received
really.
my latest
Whippets-
role of. Sorry, Claire. I was
I
just
was
saying
going to
my
say Whippets
latest.
are really clever, aren't they?
Mr. Planks isn't.
And also Nazi sympathizers, according to you, Claire. So they're not all good.
My latest role of Red Eye Redscale came back
Mm.
from Silver Pan Film Lab this afternoon, so I'll be posting fresh content over the next
Mm.
few days as well.
Great stuff. And whilst we're talking about Silver Pan Labs, I just want to give a big shout out to Duncan over at Silver Pan and everybody working over there. Big friend of the show, Duncan. Duncan, where's the new Schnauzer music? You promised me new Schnauzer music. Where's my new Schnauzer music? That is all. Thank
Hairy
you
plums.
so much. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in this week, for listening, for watching. If you've managed to sit through all this, which I very much doubt the viewers have managed to, but thank you if you have. John, thank you as always for all your hard work putting this video together and making sure it's recorded, seeing as my recording failed halfway through, so that's good. We'll be back with you later in the week. Oh, no, we won't be back with you. We'll be back with you next. Hey, listen, guys, we'll be back. Count on it. Until then, thank you very much for listening / watching. Goodbye.
Thank you for
Bye,
having me.
everybody.
Goodbye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Good night.